Happy day to all. Today, Class 10 Biology, Chapter 9 Heredity and Evolution, Part 1. What is heredity and what is variation? Heredity is the process of transfer of characters or traits from the parents to their offspring. We call it as heredity. That is, from the parents, the characters, it can be the color of the eye or texture of the hair and so on. Those characters are being transferred from the parents to the offspring. We call it as heredity. And variation, the term itself say something is varying. So it is variation is nothing but the difference between the character or the traits among the individuals of the same species. We call it as variation. So here you can see different pictures. One, it is grapes, green, purple or pinkish color, or the same species but slight variation in the leaf structure. Birds of same species with different colored feathers, and puppies you can see. The same way the human being kids, they differ from even the same siblings. There will be difference in their that is it can be any character or any traits, and these difference between the character or the traits among the individual of species, we call it as variation. Example, human height is a trait which show different variation. It can be they can be tall, they can be short, or they can be in medium size. Another example, here you can see the picture itself, which shows the earlobe, and it shows two variations, that is having free earlobe and attached earlobe. Clearly the picture depicts. So the variation, why we need variation? Variation is necessary for evolution. And we know that the great advantage of variation is that it can increase the chance of survival in a changing environment. With the changing environment, we could see that uh, when with slight variation, why variation should happen. So variation is the one which can give a chance of survival for an organism in the changing environment. The next topic is the accumulation of variation during reproduction. So we all know that all organisms, they reproduce. In the last chapter itself, chapter 8, how do organisms reproduce, we have learned about the different types of reproduction. In plants as well as in animals, unicellular as well as multicellular organism. And when organisms reproduce, the offsprings, they show minor variation in their progeny or the next young offsprings, and this is due to an inaccuracy in DNA copying, and these variations are less in asexual reproduction and more in sexual reproduction. What do you mean by DNA? DNA is nothing but the genetic material that are present in a body or in each cell, and they are responsible for carrying forward the trait of one trait from one generation to another generation. and and how it is taking place, we know that it is through cell division, and during the process of cell division we can see that some inaccuracies takes place during the formation of the copying time of DNA, and which results in slight variation. And some variations it is useful for the organisms to adjust and survive in this changing environment, but some variation they do not help the organisms to get adjusted to the changes in the environment, and they may die and become extinct. Here we know, I was just talking about the characters, the traits, and so on. What are all these? These are present or embedded inside the DNA. And these characters get transferred through these DNA molecules present in the gene on the chromosomes which are present in the nucleus of the cell. So nucleus is the center for cell division. Or what is cell division? Cell division, it can um, it it aids in the growth of an organism as well as um, based on the different what type of division taking place. If it is a mitotic division, it takes place in all somatic cells. If it is a meiotic cell division, it is for the process of the reproductive cells or formation of gametes. So here we know the inheritance of characters is due to the fact that both the father and mother contribute equal amount of genetic material to the child. So for each trait, there are two factors, one from the father and another from the mother. So we know how many chromosomes are present in our body. There are 23 pairs of chromosomes present in human cell. And we know that out of these 23 chromosomes, 21 chromosomes, 22 pairs of chromosomes, we call them as autosomes. And one pair of chromosome, we call it as allosomes. And these 22 pairs of autosomes, they are responsible for the cell division that takes place in the somatic cells, all other cells. And the last one pair of allosomes, they are sex chromosomes, or they are responsible for the traits that need to be formed during the process of formation of gametes. So when such a process takes place, that is a formation of one pair of allosomes. Here we know that one pair out of that, one will be single trait will be from the father, and the same allelic pair will be from the mother. So that is why for each trait, the two factors are being present, and one factor will be from the father and the other factor will be from the mother. So we were talking about a gene and all those things. We will see what are those things. So a gene is a unit of DNA on a chromosome which transfer characters from parents to their offspring during the process of reproduction. So a gene is the unit of inheritance or heredity. So heredity, the other term, it is inheritance. That is nothing but getting transferred from generation to generation, from parents to offspring. So these genes, they are used for controlling the same character in an organism, and it can be of two types. It can be dominant or it can be recessive. Now we will see what are these terms, dominant and recessive. Dominant, you would have heard about that term. So dominance, showing, dominating. So here when the gene which decides the appearance of an organism, even in the presence of an alternative gene, that appearance, we call it as appearance by that gene, we call that gene as dominant gene. So the dominant genes are usually expressed or shown. So if it is a tallness or smoothness or that is the color of the eye, if it is a dominant trait, that trait will be expressed in that generation or in that progeny formed. So the gene which can decide the appearance of an organism only in the presence of another identical gene is called recessive gene. So here a recessive gene and a dominant gene will be present, constituting the two parents, that is the father and then the mother gene, where if one among alone will be expressing, that expressed gene we call it as a dominant gene, and non-expressed or unexpressed gene that are present together with that trait we call it as a recessive gene. So the dominant gene is represented by a capital letter, and the corresponding recessive gene is represented by the same letter in small. So for example, if we are taking the character or the trait as a tallness, so tallness is dominant over dwarfness or shortness. So for example, if we are talking about the dominant gene for tallness, it will be represented as capital T, and the recessive gene for the dwarfness is represented by small t. Next two terms that I want you all to know is that we'll come across when we see the hereditary and evolution will be the genotype and phenotype. So gene, genotype, physical nature, phenotype. So I will explain. Genotype is the description of gene present in an organism. So that is genetically what it is present inside an organism is being, the description of that gene will be expressed as a genotype or set as genotype. And phenotype is the physical characteristics or traits which is visible in an organism. We call it as a phenotype. So example, we can say tallness or dwarfness. It is the phenotype, example for a phenotype. And if it is a genotype, we know that in between, so we have true tallness, true dwarfness, and in between we have a hybrid variety too, or a medium sized. So these we call it as comes under the genotype. So it was the father of genetics, a term his name is Gregor Johann Mendel, and he was the person who first experimented on the genetics. So Mendel was the first scientist to make a systematic study of patterns of inheritance, which involved the transfer of characters from parents to their offspring. So he chose pea plants. Pisum sativum is the scientific name of pea plant, for studying inheritance due to the following reasons. Many reasons are there why Mendel he has chosen the pea plant. So the pea plant, they have variations for many traits. So they can have pea plants, they have tallness and dwarf plants, green and yellow seeded plants, round and wrinkle seeded plants, and many more. So these characters make them chose, that is Mendel chose the pea plant. And the second one is the pea plants are self-pollinating as well as cross-pollinating. It can be self-pollinated as well as it can be cross-pollinated. The next one is one of the most important trait of pea plant. It has got a short lifespan. So within that is fair amount of time, they can produce many generations can be formed, and it is easy to grow. So these are some of the factors that made Mendel chose a pea plant for his studying inheritance. So in the first generation, or the next two terms that comes during his experiment, it is a first generation or first filial generation, F1 generation, and the second term is second generation, F2 generation or second filial generation. So what are these generation? So the first generation or the F1 generation, it is nothing but when two parents cross to produce their offspring, then that of offsprings are called the F1 generation. That is the first generation. When two parents are being crossed, they produce their progeny, or the first filial generation or F1 generation. And what is second generation or F2 generation? When this F1 generation or the first filial generation offspring or the plants, they cross among themselves to produce offspring, then that offsprings are called as F2 generation or second filial generation or second generation. So now we will pass on to the Mendel's experiments. So when plants having one pair of characters were chosen by the Mendel, he called that cross as a monohybrid cross. Example, tallness and shortness. That is a single trait or a single character. So Mendel, he selected pea plants having one pair of characters, a tall pea plant and a short plant. And he selected pure tall and pure short pea plant and cross-pollinated them. He, in his first F1 generation, what are the plants he has received? So he obtained all F1 plants as tall plants. And when the that is the first generation plant were self-pollinated, he obtained tall and dwarf plants in the ratio 3:1 in the second generation or F2 generation. So the ratio of pure tall, that is capital T, and hybrid tall, capital T, small t, and pure dwarf, small t, was in the ratio 1:2:1. And the trait that is expressed in the F1 generation, we call it as the dominant trait, and the trait that is suppressed in the F1 generation, we call it as a recessive trait. So here the dominant trait is the tallness, and here the ratio which was given 1:2:1. What is that ratio? It is 1:2. It is based on genotypic ratio, the genetic material present, that is pure tall, then hybrid tall, and pure dwarf. So here the picture also show all tallness versus the short plant, the generation form, and another character, it was that is round and wrinkled seeds were taken into consideration. Another one, purple and white color, that is white colored flowers were chosen, and the ratio they got was 3:1. Or when we see the that is the genotype, it will be 1:2:1 ratio. Next, he didn't stop with the monohybrid cross. He thought different characters are present. So he has chosen two pairs of characters for his next experiment. And these two characters, for example, we can say shape and color of seeds were crossed, that is dihybrid cross. And he selected pea plant having two pairs of character, shape and color of seed. He selected plants having round yellow seeds, which was expressed as capital R, capital Y, and wrinkled green seeds, small r, small y, and he cross-pollinated them. And he obtained all plants with the round yellow seeds, that is in the F1 generation. And when these plants were self-pollinated in the F2 generation, out of 16 plants, 9 had round yellow, 3 had round green, and 3 had wrinkled yellow, and 1 had wrinkled green seed. And the ratio was 9:3:3:1. So here, in the square, this square representing these dihybrid cross in a square, we call the square as Punnett Square. So expressing the dihybrid cross in a, so here you can see capital R, the gametes, male gamete as well as the female gamete, they have chosen that is capital R, capital Y, capital R, small r, capital Y, small r, small y. These were the female as well as the male gametes chosen, and the seeds formed were 9:3:3:1. So the clear picture here, it shows the complete dihybrid cross. R, capital R is the dominant allele of seed shape round. Small r is the recessive allele for seed shape wrinkle. Capital Y, dominant allele for seed color yellow, and small y, the recessive allele for seed color green. And when during the first generation formed, when the parental generation were round yellow and wrinkled green, they got the F1 generation as a all round yellow colored seed, and from there they self-pollinated and they got the ratio as the round yellow 9, round green 3, wrinkled yellow 3, and wrinkled green 1. So the ratio, the resulting phenotypic ratio was 9:3:3:1. I think you would have followed these dihybrid cross in a Punnett Square. So the next topic is sex determination in human beings. And earlier I have talked about allosomes as well as autosomes and so on. So in human beings, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes in the nucleus of the cell. Out of this, 2 chromosomes are sex chromosomes, that is capital X and capital Y. The female has 2 X chromosomes, that is capital X, that is the eggs. They have only XX chromosomes, and the males, they have 1 capital X and 1 capital Y chromosome, that is capital X, capital Y. The sperm and the eggs have 1 set of sex chromosomes present, and some sperms, they have X chromosomes, and some sperms, they have Y chromosomes, whereas all eggs have X chromosomes only. And if a sperm having X chromosome fuses with an egg that is already X chromosome, the child will be a girl having capital X chromosomes. And if a person having Y chromosome fuses with an egg that is X chromosome, the child will be a boy, capital X, capital Y. So here the picture itself depicting the blue color as a male and yellow color as female. So the female, they have only these X chromosomes. X, they have only X chromosomes, and the males, they have 2 different gametes can be produced by forming X chromosome or Y chromosome. So whichever sperm which contains, if it is X chromosome, sperm is fusing with the egg X chromosome, then the child will be a girl child having XX chromosome. And if a Y sperm is crossing or fusing with the the X chromosome, egg chromosome, then the child formed will be a male, having a boy having XY chromosomes. And the sex of the newly born baby are being it can be given only by the sperms, because sperms alone contains X chromosome or Y chromosome. Based on that, the young, that is the progeny are being, or the sex of the newly born baby are being expressed only by the sperm giving which type of sperm containing, it can be X chromosome or it can be Y chromosome. Based on that, the new progeny's sex will be determined. Thank you.